kan dere sende det, eller de får se det, muligheten til å se det i ettertid. Der opptaket startet.
Tida.
We start in 2 minutes.
Choose what you would like to share. Kola Masach, Chalona Applicatia, Microsoft Edge tab. אני עושה כל המסך. כן?
כן.
הוא לא נותן לי, אני נותן application window.
אז תעשה ככה, ואז תיכנס.
לא, application window זה זה.
From now on, it's good if you mute your microphone until you speak.
לא, תיכנס רגע למצגת.
המצגת אני יכול לעשות.
זה מה שאתה צריך.
אבל הם לא יראו אותי בזמן שאני מדבר?
הם יראו אותך.
איפה?
אתה יהיה בטח כמו בזום. הפנים, לא? ככה אני מאמינה. גם שאתה עושה share בזום,
אבל למה אני לא שומע כלום?
Excellent. Welcome, Cynthia. We see your presentation now also. That's very good to see that it works.
Very good. Wonderful to be here.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kiora. You can now maybe just put it down until you speak, and we are very grateful that you can join up till you speak also. I know that it's very late. It's after midnight for you right now, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. We talk soon. Good afternoon, everybody. God ettermiddag, alle sammen. Now we are ready for the second webinar in this series. And on this webinar today, we have speakers from Sápmi, we have from New Zealand, we have from Britain, and we have from Israel. So I think this also shows some of the possibilities that internet and this kind of webinars give us, that we can gather people from all corners of the world, so to say, to meet and discuss the topics we work with. Den første innlederen vi har i dag Liv Karin Joma. Hun har jobbet med veldig mange utviklingsprosjekter i samisk, og lærer på Grong videregående skole. Hun har også kjørt og kjører kurs i UH-sektoren på universitetet, og leder for sørsamisk lærernettverk. Vær så god, Liv Karin. Nå må du bare huske å unmute.
Vi hører ikke deg, Liv Karin. Ja. Nå, hører dere meg nå?
Ja.
Nå hører vi. Ja, det bra. Ja, så skal jeg ha takk for det, Kevin, for å bli geistones. Som sagt så heter jeg Liv Karin Joma og jobber ved Grong videregående skole. Og jeg med her i dag, for det var så mye lyd på øret. Jeg leder for sørsamisk lærernettverk på videregående skolesnivå, og det på grunn av det at jeg har vært spurt av en Kevin om å innlede. Og det her nettverket vårt, det består av lærere som underviser i sørsamisk, og vi kommer fra Ajeger på Røros. Vi har lærere fra Åreshelmen, Vjertesofo i Hattjøldal, og fra Grong videregående skole. De fleste av oss som lærere i sørsamisk, og underviser i sørsamisk, vi har hatt, eller har har hatt fjernundervisning. Og det jo og nå det jo sånn at vi har også fått sørsamiske lærere som selv har fått opplæring I sørsamisk gjennom fjernundervisning. Og fra å være alene på en skole som har fjernundervisning, så det jo en annen virkelighet vi har nå, med at alle lærere på skolen vår, de har måttet prøve seg på det samme. Og nå så skjønner alle at fjernundervisning ikke nødvendigvis alltid så enkelt. Selv for oss som har deltatt på fjernundervisningsseminar, vi har deltatt på kurs og opplæring med mer. Fra vi begynte med fjernundervisning og til I dag så har det skjedd en voldsom utvikling når det gjelder programmer og muligheter. Nå har vi tilgang på Teams, Skype, Zoom med mer. Og fra å diskutere om vi fikk lov til å bruke Skype, så diskuterer vi nå hvilke programmer som funker best. Men fjernundervisning, det handler ikke bare om programmer en skal bruke. En ting som spesielt vil nevne synkron opplæring. Og det her tror jeg noe av det viktigste vi holder på med. I sørsamisk område så bor elevene spredt, og I mange tilfeller det kun I sørsamisk tema at de har muligheten både til å høre og prate samisk. Og I mange tilfeller så læreren den eneste språkmodellen elevene har. Og da sier det seg selv at det både viktig å kunne se og prate med noen. Nå har jeg spurt elevene mine hva de synes om fjernundervisning. Og de fleste sier, ok, det noe bra. Men de fleste de lei av å bli satt til å gjøre oppgaver og levere dem inn for vurdering. Og det her ble ekstra mye av når vi måtte I hjemmeskole og skolen ble stengt. Og da det jo viktig at vi som lærere ikke glemmer at både når det gjelder fjernundervisning og vanlig undervisning, så må vi variere innholdet I timene og de oppgavene vi gir. En annen ting som utrolig viktig, det trygghet. Dersom vi skal ha flere elever sammen på nettet, så det viktig at elevene kjenner hverandre, og at de trygge på hverandre før vi setter dem til å prate I lag. Og særlig når det gjelder å lære seg nye språk. Og så det jo viktig at vi som lærere og elever kjenner hverandre. Det gir elevene trygghet, noe som viktig for å kunne lære. Og da de her samlingene vi holder på med, der vi samler elevene, utrolig viktig for at vi kan bli kjent og skape trygghet. Utfordringer har det alltid vært med fjernundervisning, og det vil det alltid være. Jeg tror aldri det vil forsvinne. Og vi som har holdt på med det her, har hatt problemer med lyd og bilde, og deling av skjerm og alt mulig rart. Og da det ble hjemmeskole, så forsvant ikke her problemene heller. Og mange ganger så bruker vi utrolig mange minutter av undervisningstimene for å få ting til å fungere. Og nå vi jo veldig mange som har holdt på med det her veldig lenge. Og vi har opparbeidet oss en mengde med tips og råd, hvordan få ting til å fungere. Som jeg tror kan være nyttig for dem som nettopp har begynt. Så, Kevin, det jeg vil si til deg, det at jeg vil oppfordre deg til å få noen av dem som har jobbet mye på de forskjellige nivåene med samisk fjernundervisning til å dele den erfaringen de har med de andre. Jeg tror det veldig nyttig at vi kan lære av hverandre. Takk for meg.
Og Logito, Liv Karin, tusen takk, Liv Karin, og det var en veldig god oppfordring du hadde på slutten. Den noterer vi, og den skal vi definitivt komme tilbake til. På avslutningen av neste webinar så kommer jeg til å si litt mer om om hvordan vi jobber videre etter det her, men det var I hvert fall et godt innspill fra lederen I sørsamisk lærernettverk. Thank you very much, Liv Karin. The next speaker today is Jean-Marc Dewaele. He's originally from Belgium, but he's professor at University of London, and he used to be a keynote speaker at some of the biggest language conferences in Europe and also outside Europe. He's very skilled on this subject he's going to speak about today, which is how to create emotions for better language learning. I should also mention now that he have a lot of other skills as well. For example, he has a black belt in karate, but I don't think that is what he's going to speak about today. But the floor is yours, Jean-Marc.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and your colleagues for inviting me. Apologies that my camera doesn't want to switch on. It's one of these mysteries of COVID times, I guess. As I will start my presentation here. So is this visible?
Yes, it is.
Good.
Yes, we see it. Thank you. There we also have your picture so people know who you are.
Exactly. I thought I added a picture at the last minute there. Before I start my presentation, I would like to explain a little bit why I became interested in this topic. I started my career as a teacher of French as a foreign language at the Flemish University in Brussels. And then I continued also teaching French when I joined the French department at Birkbeck in 1994. And one of the, I don't know why, but somehow I was always teaching on Friday evening between 6 and 9 p.m., which is typically the graveyard slot in foreign language teaching, because by then students are tired, it's been a long week, and so to keep their attention, it was absolutely crucial to create the right emotional temperature in the class. And I saw it as a personal challenge, really, to keep them interested and engaged all the way to 9 p.m. when they could join their friends in the pub and have a pint or have a meal or continue with life outside of the classroom. So it was really interesting to see how you could get a group into a state of flow where they forgot where they were, what time it was, what day of the week it was, and they were fully engaged in a challenging task. And it could be a conversation, it could be a dialogue or a presentation. And I thought it was really wonderful to get these people in a state of flow. And it was also fascinating to see how at around 5 to 9, I said, okay, this is enough for today, well done. And to see how people tumbled out of this state of flow and suddenly realized just how tired they were, how knackered. And it was fascinating to see them stumble out of the room. And I myself was exhausted by the end of such a class. And I remember thinking that emotions are really what sustain both the learners and the teachers. And it's only later that I started investigating this in a more systematic manner. So I should start by defining what I understand by emotion. I refer to the dimensional paradigm, more specifically to the theory by Lisa Feldman Barrett on constructed emotions. She sees emotions as domain non-specific constructions of the mind, which are shaped in the course of socialization. So this also allows for cultural differences, because every socialization is pretty unique. One of the key points of her theory is that emotions do not have a unique fingerprint, meaning that somebody who smiles is not necessarily happy, and someone who looks angry may in fact be experiencing various different emotions, and it might not be anger at all. So it is possible to misinterpret facial expressions. And that is also important if you are a teacher. Somebody who looks bored in class is not necessarily really bored. And sometimes they may fake enthusiasm and not really be enthusiastic. There's been interesting research in educational psychology on emotion, and I would draw your attention to the control value theory of academic emotions by Pekroon and colleagues. He proposed a three-dimension taxonomy with valence, activation, and object focus. And in recent work with my Chinese colleague Chen Li, we have used this framework to analyze enjoyment, anxiety, and more specifically foreign language learning boredom. When I started doing work on emotion in second language acquisition, I was surprised that there was so little about it. And I realized that it was really linked to the dominant cognitive perspective in second language acquisition, nicely put by Jan Hulstein, that language learning is biology, chemistry, and it's in the brain. The heart doesn't play a role. And Meryl Swain acknowledged that in a 2013 article explaining that emotions are like the elephants in the room. Nobody really understands them well, and they're seen as inferior to rational thought. And I would say that relatively recently, this has started to change as a special issue in the Modern Language Journal. Matthew Pryor wrote that, yes, there is this elephant in the room. We need to open up the windows. We need fresh air. We need more space. So we need to move beyond. I was really happy about this because in 2005, I started pleading to fellow researchers in SLA to take into account psychological and emotional dimensions of foreign language learning. And I repeated this call in a 2011 paper and referred back also to work that Peter McIntyre and colleagues have done, that emotions are important motivators. So taking into account learners' emotions is also taking into account their motivation and their willingness to move forward and to invest in the foreign language learning. And in fact, in a recent chapter with Peter and colleagues, we linked Gardner's attitudes and motivation test battery with the so-called PANAS, positive and negative emotion scale. And we showed that the positive emotions were significantly linked with positive attitudes and motivation. So although Gardner didn't talk much besides attitudes which have an emotional component and foreign language anxiety, it is clear that attitudes and motivation are highly emotional constructs. So in that same special issue, I contributed a small piece where I said that we have a lift-off of emotion research in applied linguistics, pointed to the number of papers that mentioned the word emotion and showed that it has increased significantly since 2010, and that before 2010, if it was about emotion, it was typically on anxiety. I should also add that before 2010, another popular word was affect. And though it is still used, it is used less frequently than it used to be. There's also been a change in the field of applied linguistics and second language acquisition, with an increasing interest in the psychology of both learning and teaching foreign languages. And this new association of which I'm part is organizing regular conferences and has a journal that focuses specifically on this intersection between psychology and applied linguistics. I should also add that the arrival of positive psychology in applied linguistics has boosted interest in the field. In case you don't know about positive psychology, it's the study of normal people rather than people with problems. The idea being that we need also to help normal people to thrive and flourish. It doesn't mean that negative aspects are ignored, but it's just complemented with more positive topics. And so the typical keywords are flow, hope, courage, well-being, optimism, creativity, happiness, etc. And I realized that there are in fact also all the qualities that are required to be a good teacher and a good foreign language teacher. You need to believe that your students, no matter how bad they may be in your eyes at the beginning of the year, that they will improve, that you will be able to push them forward on their foreign language learning journey. So positive psychology looks at three main pillars: positive subjective experience, positive individual traits, and also positive institutions. It's particularly relevant to learning, where positive emotions open up the horizons of the learner. It broadens their perspective. It allows them to absorb new information, whereas negative emotions have exactly the opposite effect. It causes a narrowing of focus, a feeling of threat, retrenchment, restriction of potential language input. So positive psychology has had a strong impact on SLA research, and it is continuing to do so, and it is broadening the potential for other variables in research designs. So here you see a picture of Peter McIntyre and myself when we presented our paper, Two Faces of Janus, at the 2012 AAAL conference, and where we argued in favor of a more holistic take on emotions in SLA. We combined within the same design foreign language classroom anxiety, which had been around for a while, and we refer to Elaine Horitz and colleagues, the 1986 article, where she defined foreign language classroom anxiety as this distinct complex of self-perceptions, beliefs, feelings, behaviors, specifically related to classroom language learning and the uniqueness of the language learning process. And then Peter McIntyre and myself, we defined foreign language enjoyment as a complex, positively balanced emotion with high arousal, resulting from a combination of challenge and perceived ability that allows tackling difficult tasks. So you see that we were influenced by positive psychology and the concept of flow. So we designed a 21-item scale that you have there in front of you. As you see, so we asked participants how much they agreed with different statements. You see that there are elements that refer to themselves, to the classroom environment and their peers, and also to the teacher. With Eloise Botes and Samuel Greif from the University of Luxembourg, we've just submitted this paper to a journal where we propose a short form of this scale, just 9 items reflecting personal enjoyment, teacher appreciation, and social enjoyment. So in the original research, we collected data from 1,746 participants. We found that enjoyment and anxiety were in fact not opposites on the same dimension, that they were separate dimensions, though moderately negatively correlated. It's something that we found again with different data samples. We also concluded that enjoyment and anxiety are not in a seesaw relationship, meaning that pushing anxiety down doesn't mean that enjoyment automatically goes up. These two dimensions are pretty independent from each other. What we found also was that in response to an open question, that our participants in their descriptions of really enjoyable episodes highlighted activities where they felt empowered, where they had a certain degree of autonomy, where they could be creative and could collaborate with classmates. They also underlined how important it was to get some praise and some encouragement from the teacher and also from fellow students, and that humor, mutual trust and respect were really at the basis of their enjoyment of the foreign language class. So we continued research into sources of enjoyment. We found it to be linked to age, gender, degree of multilingualism, with female participants reporting more enjoyment and more anxiety. Also older learners reporting more enjoyment, less anxiety. Enjoyment was also linked to having a higher level of mastery in the foreign language, feeling that you were pretty good compared to your classmates and getting good results for the tests and exams in the class. So here was one of our findings. As you see, the more advanced learners reported significantly more enjoyment and less anxiety. And I would claim that you would probably find the same pattern if you looked at learners of playing violin or learning a new sport. When you start, you may have some enjoyment but high levels of anxiety. As you become more confident, you may enjoy it more and your anxiety starts to drop off. We also found it to be linked to personality traits like cultural empathy and emotional intelligence. And Lee and Shu carried out a positive psychology-based emotional intelligence intervention with their Chinese EFL learners, and they found that they managed to boost students' emotional intelligence as well as enjoyment, and that they managed to lower their level of anxiety. Then very often the sources of enjoyment are more complex. They are linked to micro, meso, macro levels. So having a positive attitude towards the foreign language and culture is really important. And I think that especially if you are talking about the learning of Sami, that having a positive attitude towards the language and the culture that it represents is absolutely crucial. We also found differences between L1 and first languages in a study with Pierre Resnick, where lower enjoyment in German L1 classes could have been linked to the fact that they were didactically less exciting than the English foreign language classes. I will also show you a little graph later showing how much even the specific teacher may have an effect on enjoyment, but not on anxiety, that the school also has an effect as well as the broader societal context. So sometimes sources of enjoyment are both learner internal and external. And in a study I did with colleagues and with my daughter Livia, we collected data from London students, and we found that those who scored higher on enjoyment typically had more positive attitudes towards the foreign language, towards the teacher, towards teacher unpredictability, the use of the foreign language in class, how much time was spent speaking, on having good test results, a high relative standing, and being more advanced. So you see that enjoyment was really very much linked to the teacher, whereas lower levels of anxiety were completely not linked to the teacher. And so here are a few graphs from that paper. So you see that the more positive the attitude towards the teacher, the higher the level of enjoyment. Also, that the more the teacher used the foreign language in class, the higher the level of enjoyment. And also that teachers who were not too predictable, and in fact, the least predictable teachers were the ones where students experienced a high level of enjoyment. So I think that's a crucial point, that it's important to avoid boring routines, and it's good to introduce unexpected new elements in the classroom. I inserted a picture there being a proud dad of my daughter. We collected the data together and co-authored a couple of papers based on it. We wondered whether enjoyment and anxiety would change over time, and we used a pseudo-longitudinal design. We found that, in fact, there wasn't much change, that there was a little dip for enjoyment for the 14, 15-year-olds, probably because they had national exams at the time and that they were being taught to prepare for the test. As you see, there wasn't much change in anxiety. But then when we looked a little bit closer, we found that the predictors of enjoyment and anxiety changed over time. In the youngest group, enjoyment was predicted by peers and anxiety by self. In the middle-age group, enjoyment was predicted by the teacher and anxiety by the self. And in the oldest group, enjoyment was predicted by the teacher and anxiety was predicted by the peers and the reaction of peers to making mistakes, for example. So as I said before, the specific teacher also has a significant effect on enjoyment, but not on anxiety. So we had a subsample of 40 students who had two different teachers for the same foreign language. We call them main and secondary teacher. And as you see in the graph, enjoyment was higher with the main teacher compared to the second teacher. And I should add that the difference between both was that typically the main teacher was more experienced than the second teacher. And pursuing this avenue of research, I did a study with a BA student of mine and a colleague, Magdalena Franco and Saito, with Spanish EFL learners. We found that friendly teachers, that friendliness was a strong predictor of enjoyment, but that a strong foreign accent was a negative predictor of enjoyment. And then we looked into a bit more detail running an ANOVA, and you have that on the screen at the left. As you see, teachers who had a very strong foreign accent, their students reported lower levels of enjoyment. But as you see, it is pretty constant, and it's only at the highest level of foreign accent that enjoyment drops off. Strictness then was a predictor of anxiety, and as you see, it levels off about mid-scale. Then looking into sources of enjoyment and anxiety, we ran quantitative and qualitative analysis of episodes that provoked enjoyment and anxiety, and we found that, in fact, anxiety was typically linked to self, whereas enjoyment was typically linked on the relation between self and teacher. So it confirmed independently that enjoyment is really much linked to the teacher. Now, why does this matter? It matters because students who have higher levels of enjoyment, lower levels of anxiety, perform better, do better in exams. And this is a study with my Chinese colleagues. As you see, students with higher levels of performance reported lower levels of anxiety and higher levels of enjoyment. So I'm reaching the end of my presentation there. What can teachers do to control anxiety and boost enjoyment using non-threatening techniques, promoting solidarity and trust, establishing good rapport, radiating positive feeling, supportive emotional environment. I totally agree with Rebecca Oxford that hope, optimism, humor are really important, and that teachers also need to mind their own mental well-being, that if they are unhappy, they are unlikely to be able to create a positive classroom atmosphere. Here are some indications for possible further directions. I think mixed methods are important, a wide range of time frames. We need more longitudinal research. I'm also interested in the effect of specific target languages, comparing first and foreign languages, linking the emotions with engagement, motivation, and linking this to teaching techniques. I think the latest emotion to be investigated, boredom, also has lots of potential. How can we fight boredom of students? And also more research into nonlinear relationships between emotions and performances. So here are some references, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marc. It was very good to get the, so to say, the research perspective here and all your experience on the field. I wonder if there is any questions immediately to you, or if are you going to join the rest of the webinar, Jean-Marc? Or
yes, I'll stay on. Yes.
Great, thank you very much. So then I think we might leave the questions till afterwards. Okay. Thanks. Our next speaker is Cynthia White from New Zealand. Kia ora, Cynthia. We are very happy to have you here, and as I mentioned before the start today, that it's very sportive because it's after midnight over there, if I'm correct. So we appreciate very much that you could join so late in the evening for you. What you are going to speak about now is innovation and identity in distance teaching, and you're a professor at, I will see if I manage to get this right, Te Kunenga ki Purehuroa. Is that, or you can maybe, it's much better if you pronounce it yourself.
Good.
Thank you, the floor is yours.
Yes, okay, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Cynthia White taku ingoa ngō makopu me te akoreo aku ko papa. Greetings, colleagues in the Northern Hemisphere. It's a real honour and pleasure to join you today in the middle of the night, as Kevin just said. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is, as in Jean-Marc Dewaele's talk, it's also been a sustained research area for me. It's about distance language teaching. However, because you are teachers of Sami language, an Indigenous language, here I'm going to focus quite a bit on, particularly in the second half of my talk, on the Indigenous language of New Zealand. So I'm going to begin by setting the context very briefly, talking about New Zealand. Then I'm going to talk about teaching, then I'm going to talk about teacher development, and then I'm going to give a conclusion, and there might be some questions, which would be very nice. So first of all, I don't know how much you know about New Zealand, but the Indigenous people of New Zealand are Māori, and these pictures here are taken from my university website, where you'll see that Māori has quite a strong presence. We are a bicultural nation, so Māori and English have equal rights together, and this becomes very relevant for language teaching. You'll see this in a moment. We can't really talk about language without also talking about culture and identity. So this screen, also from my university, is all the kind of help and advice you can get. And you can see it refers to culture, language, and also other areas of identity, such as on the bottom right, having a marae, that's a specific building for Māori, where Māori can go on the campus, can spend time, but also that we all of the university uses. So we put a lot of emphasis on the interactions between the cultures. Now, as you know, when cultures come into contact, in this case Māori and English culture, we tend to borrow words from each other. And one word that is used a lot in New Zealand is the Māori word ako. And ako means, it comprises the two elements of teaching and learning. So you can't talk just about teaching without, in Māori, if you're talking about teaching, you are automatically encompassing the idea that to teach you also need to learn. And this is quite fundamental. So it emphasizes the relationship and reciprocity between people, between the teacher and the learner. It recognizes that both teachers and learners bring knowledge to their interaction. So it's very important that teachers understand learners and their experience. And the third thing is it acknowledges that new knowledge comes from shared learning experience. Now, there's a proverb here, a whakatoki, and I'll just read it out to you. Tangata ako ana I te whare, te tūranga ki te marae to ana. You'll see the second word is ako. Tangata means a person. And I've included this because it goes more to the broader philosophy, which is that a person who's taught at home, it can literally mean home, but it really means in an environment that works for them, will stand collected on the marae. And so collected means will stand strong, confident, and on the marae really means when they need to perform in public. So underlying all of this is a philosophy that if you need to connect with learners and understand them and teach them according to their own environment. And this is obviously quite the challenge in distance teaching, but it's a challenge we need to consider. So now moving on directly to distance language teaching. I began researching distance language teaching in 1988, very long time ago. And of course now we can have access to a language in our hands. And I think this is very important because it shows that language learning can be integrated into daily life. So if you forget a word, you can look it up quite easily. You don't have to go home, look up a dictionary and so on. So that's very important. However, as we know, it comes with the challenge of getting learners to stay on task and to stay in the online learning space and not to get distracted by other platforms. So I'll mention that in a moment. So one of the articles I've written in this area, focusing on teachers, is that teachers are challenged to transform themselves when they become a distance or blended language teacher, or when they begin to teach online. They have to find new ways of being a language teacher and to feel comfortable with that, and they have to act in new ways. So I don't have time to go through all of these, but many years ago I identified what the new skills and competencies are. And whenever I get this list out, no matter how much the technology has changed, I find they're all extremely important. Number 3 is very difficult. Identify the characteristics and needs of language learners at distant sites. That's always been a challenge, and yet if we are to connect with learners in a meaningful way, we need to do that. But if I ask teachers to identify which of these they find the most challenging, they tend to come up with this one: to motivate learners at a distance. And motivate, I'm conscious Jean-Marc is in the audience here, but motivation, it's not the same concept as to engage learners, but it's linked to the idea of getting students to be willing to engage, to continue to engage, and to sustain their motivation. So that's that. So what else do teachers need? Teachers need these forms of pedagogical knowledge. Even if they may not have to do course design so much on a macro level, but they'll have to be very good at adapting the course to the needs of their learners, which is the second one, personal learning needs. They'll have to be familiar with assessment online, feedback, how do you do that? Encourage how to encourage collaboration, and also how to support learners. The last 2 are particularly important. Not only the teacher supporting the individual learner, but how do they get students to interact with each other and to value those opportunities, and thereby to continue to learn from each other. These are all challenges. Okay. That's it. Okay, here are some other challenges. The first one is to do with the course. Broadly speaking, course design, as I mentioned. But first, and particularly, this is true for Maori, though it's changing, learning resources. So Maori, like Sami, are not only indigenous languages, they're less commonly taught languages, what we call LCTLs. And not only in those languages are fewer resources available, but there are fewer open educational resources that can be shared. However, as I said, with technology, that's changing. And in New Zealand, over the last 5 years, we've seen a huge number of platforms for learning Māori. The next 4 bullet points are really from my research with individual teachers. One of the main challenges teachers find is that the needs of the student, when they identify them, seem very differentiated. So they say in one course, you suddenly seem to have 1,000 needs. And because you see more of the learner, see more of the student, that can be challenging. Also, feedback must be personalised and timely if you are to maintain motivation. Detecting individual student needs, that becomes difficult at different points, but for example, when students are not engaging or not appearing to be motivated, that can be very difficult, and addressing their needs. I've mentioned the collaboration among students, and the teacher needs to be flexible and agile. It's quite different. However, I like to see that all of these areas as sites for innovation. So one of the arguments I want to make is the innovation doesn't really come from technology. It comes from pedagogy with technology. And then always there is the complexity of the student and the teacher and that relationship. No student-teacher relationship is ever the same. And that process of ako, teaching and learning within that, is we do innovation to enhance that. So all of these areas become important for pedagogical innovation. Jean-Marc presented his list of tips. I've put some things here for me based on research. I didn't add in the research, but you have to work with the possibilities and constraints of the learning environment. What is important there is that you think about the learning environment entirely differently. Comparisons with the classroom are not very helpful, but the face-to-face classroom. But I'll carry on going through now. Here are the broad categories of skills. And I think the one that's very important is self-management, especially in a COVID world. The teacher does need to be able to maintain their well-being so that they can continue to engage. And these are the shifts that are required for teachers. This is now taken from Māori research. For teachers going online, language has to change, and that has to change because, especially if you're teaching in an immersion context online, you need to know the language of the different learning environments, and your younger your students may actually know that more than you. For students, what's very important is connected transitions between education settings. So for students to be able to move from their online learning environment to other learning environments later. And we have responsibility for that. And for community, we in New Zealand, each iwi, that's each tribe, has plans for their group, and these need to be visible when you're working with a particular group. These need to be visible. So I want to give you an example now for teacher development and professional learning. So this is a program. Tātai Angatu is a group at Massey University who do a lot of professional development, and here you can, and we do it throughout New Zealand. The North Island is much more populated than the South Island, so we only have one centre in the South Island working on this. But basically we are working with teachers across the country. We have some for their te reo, for their Māori language, and we support those teachers. We negotiate with each group of teachers in regions how they would like the support to be. If they'd like it to be mostly online, mostly face-to-face, or a blend. We see our approach as linking the school, the family, and the teacher, the kaiako, the teacher. And we see, broadly speaking, the school and the family have to come together as one community if the student is to succeed. So that's the principle we use. Just here, the aim here is to include in this program, to include Māori proficiency, accuracy, fluency, and so on, but also, and this is very important, specific language applicable to the education, the curriculum, and to learning. So we are very quickly moving from Māori as a separate language, it's across the curriculum. And also confidence for students to use the language in all teaching and learning contexts. So the program we design is co-designed. That's really important. It has to be responsive, contextualized, meaningful, and connected not only to space, to environments, but also to time, to the past that the student will bring, and going forward into the future, what they need. And focusing on, to begin with, what is happening and important to learners. This is the ACO idea. You need to notice and be aware as a teacher of what is important. This is for younger years teachers, but we can extend it across secondary school. So how do we support teachers? Well, we support teachers. There are network meetings which take place online. There are stakeholder engagement meetings that are face-to-face. There's a Facebook page, and their teachers spend a lot of time communicating. This is one of the pages, communicating and also sharing resources, posing questions and so on. Modelling of best practice within the settings, teacher observation and feedback. So we invite teachers to send us in short videos that they would like feedback on. So it might be that there is an area they're not so confident on in their teaching. If they take a short video and send it to us, we will encourage, we will give them feedback and areas for improvement. And then we have quite informal Zoom sessions and online workshops. This is some of the Māori language things that teachers have shared from their own classroom, and that's quite important for their identity, because the teachers are very often spread around the country, and by being able to share their resources online, they can feel validated by other teachers. So what we're focusing on is building teacher confidence and competence across multiple curriculum areas. And the last point is particularly important, is we're developing language profiles, so that if children move from one school to another or from online to another setting, the skills of those students and the level of proficiency will be quite clear there, and that has to fit the New Zealand context. Okay, the final example I'm going to show you here is from the Cook Islands. I'm not going to talk about this in any detail, but the Cook Islands are Pacific Islands. They are to the north of New Zealand, and going into lockdown, the Cook Islands, here you can see some of the participants on the right, were very worried about COVID. And so we, from New Zealand, we developed workshops for the teachers in the Cook Islands in 5 high schools in terms of getting them used to teaching online and at a distance. And there are real challenges there, such as the internet connection and so on, but we've worked very well with those teachers. Fortunately, if you want to read about that, I've put an article there that was published. It's an article for a general audience, but you might find it useful. So my talk here, just to conclude, has been very contextualized, but I'm talking about very specifically our New Zealand context. And that's been quite deliberate to emphasize that if we are to succeed at distance teaching in this context, we need to draw on this idea of ako in all that we do, and draw on the strengths of communities and relationships and teacher-to-teacher support. And we need all of those things in place before we begin to think about other issues, such as how to motivate learners. So setting the broader societal context is really important. So to finish, here are volcanoes just north of where I live. And this is in the South Island, Mitre Peak. And the final picture there was sent from the Cook Island teachers. They were coming, driving to to school at the time when they were doing the webinar with us about distance teaching, and they sent a rainbow of hope during a COVID world. So I pass on to you the rainbow of hope. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you everyone for listening, and it's wonderful to have been part of this.
Thank you very much once again, Cynthia, and we appreciate so much that you could join us so late in the evening for you. Since it is so late, I leave to the audience to ask questions right now for you, so you can go to bed afterwards.
Go back to bed, yes.
Er det noen spørsmål, så vær så god. Okay, it seems like there might be no questions right now, so if there is anyone later, is it okay, Cynthia, if I email you a question and then we can talk?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, everyone. It's been a real pleasure to join with you across the world. And I hope that one of the outcomes of COVID is that we across the world work together more and realize the importance of our connections with each other. So thank you all, everyone. Okay, I will now go and sleep. Thank you.
Good night.
Good
night. You once again.
Good night. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. OK, da tar vi en pause nå til klokka 14:05. We take a coffee break till 2:05 sharp. So Shlomo will be on at 2:05. Ok, da starter vi igjen, og håper alle rakk I hvert fall å få seg en kopp kaffe under pausen. Before we continue, I would like to inform that før vi fortsetter, så kan jeg informere om at dem som ønsker å høre på den tolka versjonen, så vil Markus ha ordnet sånn at dere vil også kunne se på presentasjonen der også, hvis dere dem som ønsker å gå over dit, bare så det sagt. Now I have the pleasure to introduce you to our last speaker today, which is Shlomo Eitan. Many of you have heard him before. He has visited Norway several times. He has been in Lavangen and Bodø and Trondheim and Snåsa, and he has been to the Swedish side of Sápmi, and so he's well-traveled. He's originally from New York City, but did his aliyah many years ago and moved to Jerusalem. He has been educated at the Yeshiva University in New York, and also he has taught at Hebrew University and has his own school called Eitan School now. So, vær så god, the floor is yours, Shlomo.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Shalom from Jerusalem. And I have to tell you I have to begin because in the context of the two speakers who have spoken before me, who, as a teacher, I can tell you that I drank their words with great thirst. I was very thirsty and happy to hear everything that they had to say. So much of it is so applicable. And I also would like to maybe clarify for some people what may not be perfectly obvious, but maybe it is kind of obvious in the context of what Kevin just said, and that is that Kevin, are we seeing my screen? I have to make sure I see that you see my screen. Excuse me.
Well, we see you on the screen, but we don't see any comments right now.
Just a second. So let me just make sure that it's going to be okay. There you go, maybe? No, not yet. So it's the first time I'm using this technology, so I'm more used to Zoom. Let me see.
If you go in on the three dots there, you will see an option where it says.
I see a screen that says Team Microsoft.com wants to share the context of your student. Choose what you would like to share. It says your entire screen, your application window, or your Microsoft Edge tab. Maybe this
Marcus,
is what I need.
Can you unmute and guide Shlomo on how to share his PowerPoint?
Okay, just a second. Now I'm going to share again. Maybe this time you'll let me know if I'm doing better this time.
If you see an option to choose, you have to choose your PowerPoint window.
So there's my PowerPoint window. It is actually open on my screen at this moment. I see it. The problem being that you don't, correct?
Yeah.
So I see my PowerPoint screen. So I'm going back to my Microsoft Edge, and in the screen that says your entire screen application window, and oops, just a second. There we go. It's gonna work fine, I hope now. Now you see it. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Now we see it. It's perfect.
Great. I apologize for the start, a little bit slow. And just out of curiosity, are you seeing my picture? I mean, I have my camera. I wanted to have my camera on. Let me see if I can do that one more time. Yes, I can do that as well, I hope. It says you can share your video when you're done screen sharing. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, you have to choose. So just share your PowerPoint right now.
Okay. So folks, I'm going to share my PowerPoint. but I wish you could see me. And the reason I wish you could see me is because I'm very enthusiastic and excited about being here. I love the Sami people. Kevin knows that. It is a love that's been developed over many, many years. I don't even know how many years. Maybe it's my old age. But I have been coming to, as Kevin mentioned, I've been coming to Norway for many years, and I have actually maintained friendships with some of my Norwegian hosts, Kevin amongst them. And I want to sort of go back and just, before I actually give you my PowerPoint presentation, I want to say that I feel a great deal of humility before Jean-Marc, excuse me, I don't want to mispronounce his last name, and Cynthia White.
That was fine.
Thank you very much, but that wasn't the Dewaele that you mentioned that was on the board with all of your accreditations. It was a great pleasure for me to hear you speak, Professor. I think I could learn a great deal from you, and I look forward to seeking you out to be able to do so. And the same is true with Professor Cynthia White. I also feel that the kind of connection between the professional academicians and the people that are really like myself, and I apologize really and truly that you can't see me, because, and the reason I say so to all of my Sami friends and the other people who are listening is because I think that if you could see me, you're just going to have to do this through the podcast aspect of this. In Zoom, for sure, people both see share my board and see me simultaneously. So it strikes me as a little bit of strange thing that Microsoft themselves didn't seem to solve this problem, but we're gonna live with it and do fine just the same. You'll hopefully hear as I think Jean-Marc said, my radiation of positive feeling. And on that particular note, I would like to speak to every one of the participants who is here today. And really and truly, you have to take my word for it. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. And it was confirmed by Professor Jean-Marc that to the extent that a teacher, I believe it was he who confirmed it or stated that there are sources for this, to the extent that the teacher really believes in what he is doing, he has the potential to convey that passion to his students. And I think that that's what happens with me. I'm a little bit older, 64 years old. I have now been doing this online presentations for the past, I would say, 20 years, starting with holding a telephone in my hand as I was speaking. And that was in the old days. And then the internet breaking and falling off in the middle and reconnecting. And I have lived to see this era of growth and the ability to be with students. And it is just phenomenal for me that I have been able to participate in this as a teacher. And what I want to say is that, and this is where I express once again my humility, because I think all other teachers, you're all great people. The only question that really has to be is, and this is what I would encourage you in order as we start with my first poster up here, my first slide up here on the stage is, how do we make every student great? Well, the first thing to really do is to make every teacher great at what they're doing. And the way you do that, and really my presentation will be, I think, dramatically different from that of two academicians who preceded me. And maybe that's why Kevin wants me. And maybe I'm going to even embarrass Kevin a little bit right now. And forgive me if I mispronounce her name, Liv Karin, a little bit right now if I embarrass them. But I think it would be my guess in any event that these two people are people who are driven by passion. They wake up in the morning and they say, I want to make Sami as a language real to the students who are doing distance and online learning with us. I want them to succeed. And somehow they're able to answer the question, why? Imagine every one of us, if you could see yourself perhaps sitting on an airplane, perhaps with somebody from an entirely different culture, and you struck up with them a nice conversation and you said, I am a Sami teacher. And then they asked you, why? Why is it significant? Why isn't it just enough to do Norwegian? Or Professor White, why isn't it just enough to do the English? Why, if I'm pronouncing it correct, Maori? Why do we have to also do both languages? Why do we have to have a shared culture? And I believe that when you would answer that question, why, you would really be answering the most significant element of what you can bring into the classroom. And I think that all of my students, I say it humbly, but I think that all of my students detect this guy, Shlomo Eitan, he really means it. He really wants us to get Hebrew, the language of the Bible, the language of modern Israel. And it's a success story that everyone agrees to. I mean, we're speaking a language that was very, very much just to be found in books for 2,000 years. And then we came back to the land of Israel, as everyone knows, and avoiding all political issues and all political stances, we started speaking this language called Hebrew, and it has come alive for us in such a way that it is the language of all of the people, of millions and millions of people, 7, 9, the Arabs that are in the physical state of Israel, or whatever you would want to call them, where the region where they're living, they also are speaking Hebrew. And this is just something that's amazing. And I believe that it's all connected to why. So I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't had a chance yet, please make a note of this fellow, Simon Sinek. He is a great speaker, and this is a TED Talk, and one of the more popular TED Talks. And he talks about the centrality of asking oneself why. And if you were sitting next to that person on the plane, you would have to, you would be asked, well, why is it important for you to preserve Sami language, Sami culture? And you would discover that as you spoke, you connected with your personal passion. And I can say, and I'm very blessed to be able to say so, that raison d'etre, that reason, that motivation is with me in every class that I go into. I mean, I'm very far from being a perfect human being, but I try to remind myself about why I am so committed to this, to what I'm doing. And as I start, I think that I say it with humility, because I'm concerned that I wouldn't want any of the teachers, the Sami teachers out there who are already doing a very, very difficult, challenging job, to feel that perhaps I haven't clarified yet enough to myself why I'm doing this. But if you do discover, and Simon Sinek, this fellow, will help you in your own context, if you do discover why you're doing what you're doing, for absolute sure, you will become a much more powerful, influential teacher over your students, and you will attain the end result. And the end result is that we will create a generation of Sami speakers, understanders, those who comprehend the language, and those who speak the language. And I know that all of you really want to do this. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today, and you wouldn't be led by such committed people as you are, who show you the leadership that you need to know you're onto a path that's very significant for you. So I've been talking a lot, and I'm going to talk some more, but I'm now going to pass into the very, very practical experiences that I have gained and share with you some of the insights that I have as a real teacher. In fact, after this class goes out, I'm going to spend during the course of the rest of my day 4 more hours actually teaching classes. So, and excuse me, and I have a private student tonight in Israel who happens to be United States of America. So in addition to all of the teaching that I'm doing with group classes over Zoom at this point in time, because of what we here in Israel call Corona, what the rest of the world calls COVID-19. So I'm just doing more of it than I was ever doing before. I've been doing it ever since, but I'm also doing more of it than I was ever doing. So now let's look a little bit at some of the insights that I've gained, which I found so remarkable. Many of them express themselves by the academicians, by the professors who introduced the material at the beginning, and I found it right there at ground zero. You know, that's where I have learned these lessons, and this only represents a portion of the repertoire of classes that I have learned. So one of this is, please always have a lesson plan which is fuller than you can complete. Usually the classes that I teach are 45 minutes or an hour, 60 minutes. And regardless of what, if I had my camera and I was able to put it on, unfortunately, what you would see is I could actually hold up one of my lesson plans for you and show you that I actually have a whole list of, I'm planning to do this, plan to do this, plan to do this, plan to do this. And it's really, and I make little checks and I make little notes about what I have planned and what I intend to plan. And I obviously don't always reach all of the components in my plan, but I think it's really, really critical to have that plan. I think, one, it relaxes you. It makes you feel you're never going to have a silent moment that makes you feel like, oh boy, now what do I do? That's a hard feeling for a teacher to experience. Number two on the board in front of us. I found this has been hard for me to do. And now that I'm older, it's more easy than it's ever been before. What I'm referring to is one has to learn to be silent and let the student work, sweat, experience the difficulty. I don't think any language learning is easy. I certainly agree with Professor Jean-Marc and Professor Cynthia that a person may enjoy it and hopefully will enjoy it, and their enjoyment will contribute to their success. But it would be foolish on my part to think that everyone finds it easy. I work with the whole group, the whole span of students, from those who have been told that they're second language learning idiots, all the way to people who already speak several languages. I mean, here in Israel, for example, I have now a student who speaks Russian, German, English, all perfectly. And so now the person is now for their first time learning Hebrew, and we're using Zoom to do this. So it's a challenge. He's maybe at the top end of the scale because he's European and he's not American. And usually Americans tend to be rather hard-headed about their learning skills, and especially vis-a-vis language. But he's doing really well. But it's the whole gamut, the whole breadth of students is present, and it's very, very challenging. And hence, it's very, very important to let the student, so to speak, suffer in order to grow. Number 3 is, it's really, really common when I learn, especially in any kind of oral context in the class, we're speaking, we're testing, we're giving answers, we're asking questions, that students make mistakes. So very early in the class, in the early, maybe say the early part of the year, and then probably in every class or every second class, I remind students of number 3. Mistakes are totally accepted, and they're the best tool for learning. And, you know, you don't have to be a Bible believer to know that Adam and Eve, as that story tells us, they made a mistake. And according to that narrative, men and women have got to overcome that mistake. And so mistakes seem to be built into the system in language learning. And it's, I have found in the 40 or so years that I've been teaching that when the turnaround comes, when the students really realize, hey, you know what? It's okay for me to err. It's okay for me to make a mistake. They're going to start to take off and be much more effective at their learning. In the same context, number 4, tell fellow students, don't help. Don't run to correct your fellow students' mistake before they have even realized it's a mistake. I tell students that you're not really helping the person grow, you're really hurting their growth. And it's really interesting that in the classes that I teach, students have learned also to be silent. It's such a powerful skill for a person to have. And I really encourage you to try and teach your students, you know, we're going to let each other fail, and we're not going to help. Running to help and like whispering the real answer should be, it's really stealing an opportunity of growth from the person who's trying to do the learning. And number 5, once the class has begun and we're already in the class, and I'm going to keep talking about this, but one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I got out in the open for people to see is that for every class, there must be a homework assignment, especially, and it's the only thing I really know, language learning. And really, it's the learning of the Hebrew language. But I assume that the same is true for every language, as it would be for something like sports, or it would be something like for dieting. A person has to really create a regimen, a discipline. I am going to work on this subject also outside of class. In my particular classes, I have them arranged in such a way that if the student does a very small amount of homework on a daily basis, they will progress. So that's very, what's the right word? That's very soothing and comforting for the student, that he knows, and it's true based on my experience, that if a student can develop a regimen, a exercise, a diligence at doing a reasonable amount for every class, they will certainly succeed. Needless to say, If you have ever asked a student to do an assignment, check it. Perhaps particularly in language learning. People are making an effort to learn something that's challenging for them. And when they see that the teacher takes that seriously, it helps them become more serious as well. Remember, I took this off the internet. It's a beautiful little verse that you could look up yourselves in Wikipedia. I believe an Englishman is the one who first said it. It is a lesson you should heed. Try, try, try again. If at first you don't succeed, try, try, try again. It's not about immediate success. It's about repetition. This is another of the aspects of in class, repeat, repeat, repeat. I'll give you an example, even though it's not from Hebrew. It has a comparison in Hebrew, and I suspect that it has a comparison in Sami as well. I make, or I help, or I make, it's a little bit of a tough word, but I make the students at the beginning of the year say out loud in Hebrew, not in English like I'm about to say to you. I'm going to say it to you in English because you're English. You're hearing me speak English, and if I would speak in Hebrew, it would be of no meaning to you. But they will say out loud, I, you, he, she, we, you all, y'all, which is the way that you would speak if you were in the southern part of the United States of America, which is obviously where I'm not. But since in English there are 4 different U's, I get the people to say y'all, they. Now everybody, say it again. And they say it again. And now everybody, say it again. Always with a smile on my face. But the students love repetition because repetition builds confidence. It could be about particular words. There's a word read in the present tense, and there's a word read in the past tense. Read, its past tense would be read. This could be like an oral repetition. I would say the word cooked. In the past tense, you would say cooked. I would say in the present tense, think. You would say thought. It is always powerful to repeat exercises orally again and again, right? The fear being that people, and the 2 professors spoke about this, the last thing that we ever want to see in a class is people giving up, losing hope. I believe that was a central word that Professor Jean-Marc spoke about. You never want the participants in the class to give up hope. You have to be on top of that. And now my next screen, in addition to that, what you're seeing on the screen right now, I have, that says number 1 in the upper right-hand corner. That's a little picture of me. Maybe I'll be able to go back to my picture when I finish my presentation. But this is the outside of a booklet that I give to each of the students in all the classes. We move through book 1. We move through book 2. We move through book 3. And this booklet is something that allows the students to do right exercises in class. I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed to say everyone. In fact, I'm going to be doing it later on this afternoon, my time here in Israel. Everybody open up to page 18. And I'm talking about a class in which I have 9 people present. So I'll tell everybody in the class, please do on page 18, 1 through 9. And they will all go and do the exercise. And the beauty of this is that they keep this booklet. The booklet becomes theirs, and they see that, wow, I finished book 1. I now finish book 2. This is true. This is really true what I'm saying. People become more and more proficient as we go along. Next, I have found that the greatness of my methodology is really about the picture you're seeing. and I encourage it very, very strongly. Teach the smallest incremental steps. I mean, I'm 64 years old. Lots of things have changed in this world. One of the things that I have learned is that students in this generation want to be almost spoon-fed, and they wanted everything to make sense to them, on a piece-by-piece basis. So I have found that that's the best way for me to teach. If all I can get done in one class is one skill, then teach one skill. And then, like maybe the concept of fertility, the brain, as it were, and I'm not speaking as a professional or an academician, but what I have seen time and time again is students, the curve of growth rises. More and more can be given as time goes on. In fact, I write down at the very bottom here, this is our generation. This is the people that I deal with. They don't want me to skip. They're not students that what would be called, if I were still in the United States, Harvard University, or at the best of all Ivy League schools. They're students, as a general rule. I mean, there are some very, very bright people who can certainly move faster, but as a general rule, the class wants to move incrementally. Next, you will always have to deal with this dilemma. I have a little picture that I drew here, which is new versus practice, right? People are pulling and pulling. Should we do more practice? Should we do new? Students always want to do the new, right? That's like turning another page in their browser, right? Another page in Facebook, another page, another note and notification, another message, whatever it is. Yep, there is definitely something that we have all been programmed for newness, but practice is really the skill that makes us perfect. And I wish you very, very strongly that you will give that success to students through repeated practice. Next, really, really interesting. What happens when someone makes a mistake? Well, if you look at this particular slide, you're going to see that I made a mistake. And that is the reason I left this up here. Shlomo, the teacher, made a mistake. What was I trying to do? I was trying to draw my picture, and I was having problems in my Microsoft PowerPoint presentation. And you can see down the left are appearing my slides, and I couldn't take a screenshot of anything but this. I since fixed the problem, and I could have changed it, but I wanted to leave to you the idea that in this generation, in my opinion, people are very sensitive, and we must avoid being interpreted as being critical of them. And hence, for any of you who are hearing this for the first time, it may be strong, it may be crazy for you, but I am actually right now opening an app on my telephone that I have, and I'm going to give you an experience of hearing what students hear. So I hope you heard that. That was a gong. And gong is a really nice way of the student realizing I didn't do what was the hope of the teacher, and they really like it. In fact, they use it themselves. They say gong to fellow students, and they say gong in other classes as well. And it took a lot of the caustic or painful nature off making a mistake. Next, because time is getting short, I always suggest this is for the Samis. Now, I am sure you understand this. You understand what the word is. I don't. You see the words present indicative, past indicative, imperative octative, conditional, potential. I think I understand what those words mean being a language teacher, but I have found that they're the last words that I personally can use publicly in a class. I can ask a student, if you would like a pure grammar explanation, come to me after class, but I'm encouraging you to try and find other terminologies than the traditional grammar words. I find that many students see them as a turnoff. Next, there it is, folks. That's Sami. When your students get things right, when they get things right, I strongly encourage you to give them a warm, that's Sami, right? That's what I say to other people. Say that's Hebrew. You should be saying that's Sami. It's a catchphrase. It doesn't mean anything other than you're right on target. And people desperately want that encouragement. And last but not least, you're after the class. And this was sort of brought up by the one or two or both of the professors, I'm not sure. Not this first part. I'm encouraging you, make sure you write down what you have done during the class and what you haven't and didn't get to. And that will help you vis-a-vis the next class. And now look at this. In this country, and I think in the United States, very common to use a WhatsApp. It's probably true for the Norwegians as well. We are what I would call the WhatsApp generation. Believe it or not, in my cell phone are the names and the numbers, in particular, of the students who are particularly challenged by class. If a student doesn't come, I'll send them a really nice WhatsApp. You know, I missed you in class today. Is everything okay? You know, or I think really that you might need a little extra help. Can I be of any assistance to you? And sometimes the students will write back to me, thank you for reaching out. I really appreciate it. You know, that is helping them feel that they're learning with a person. And on this note, I would like to also say to all of you, I am not an academician like the professors who spoke before me, but I'm very, very, very intrigued and interested and excited in trying to figure out solutions. I think that's one of the reasons why Kevin has been in contact with me and been so kind in having me associated with the Sami. It's I'm available at this email. I answer emails, hebrew4all1@gmail.com, and it would really be a pleasure for me to be able to contact with any of you that I might be able to contact with. That's me now, again, sitting here in Jerusalem, as you can see the city from behind me. And I really would hope that you'll have great success and that you'll challenge yourselves to become better and better teachers all the time. Okay, so that's all for now.
Thank you very much, Shlomo. It's always interesting to listen to you. We have you, Shlomo, and we also have Jean-Marc here. So I leave the floor to anyone who have a question or a comment to any of you, or discussion or whatever. So ordet fritt. Hvis noen som ønsker å spørre på norsk, så skal vi få til å oversette det engelsk. Ja. Don't be shy. Liv Karin, får jeg lov å utfordre deg bitte litt? Du åpnet ballet i dag, holdt jeg på å si, og du kom jo med en utfordring til oss om hva som var viktig å gjøre videre. Vi har notert ned noen av de spesielt elevperspektivet som du har notert tidligere. Har du noen kommentarer å si ut fra seminaret i dag?
Det har vært veldig interessant å høre på. Hører du meg?
Ja.
Og det som var så artig med kan hete Shlomo, det jo det at han begynner med det her med suksessfaktorer, hvordan få elever til å føle at de kan noe, og at de opplever at de kan lære noe. Og det jo en av de viktigste tingene vi holder på med, det at elever føler at det her går bra, det her kan jeg lære. Og jeg tror det et veldig viktig prinsipp å følge med, så det synes jeg var veldig godt å bli nevnt.
Ja. Flott. Nei, tusen takk, Liv Karin. Vi kommer til å holde kontakten videre. We can move a little further north. I see that we also have someone from Lavangen here. Lars Joar, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
You are wonderful. You have spoken to Shlomo before, and maybe it was the first time you heard Jean-Marc. Do you have any comments to any of them about what you have gained out of this? You teach both North Sami and Lule Sami.
Yes, I do that. Well, I hadn't prepared to say anything today, but I must say it has been very interesting to follow these lectures online, and especially I haven't heard from Shlomo since the start of COVID and before that, so it was really interesting. When it comes to the content of these lectures, I must say that they have given new, just not given new perspectives, but also have confirmed what we have been thinking, and I think it is very important that we continue to work on making the students or the pupils not just as a language, but as immersing themselves into the cultural aspects, and making it more than just a language, but also just as a part of their identity and sense of being a part of something bigger. So it has been really nice, and I have to congratulate you, Kevin, because it's always a pleasure to follow your conferences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars Joar. I wonder if Jean-Marc, do you want to have some final words after you will now listen to 3 other speeches also on top of your own? So do you have some comments of what you have heard today?
Yes, I would love to. I was really pleased with the 2 interventions I heard, and also by the comments just there. I think it is crucial for language learners to realize that language is never a neutral tool of communication, and that to convince learners that it is good for them to learn that language, it needs to go beyond this is a useful tool, because they might just think how boring if they cannot use that tool just outside of the classroom. And I also think that it is crucial for learners to realize that, for teachers to realize that learners are not like computers that need to be programmed, that you need to feed this linguistic information into them, and then that miraculously it will somehow flower and the students will enjoy it. I think it is much more complex, and in a way much more exciting. And I think that especially in the context of teaching a minority language, it is absolutely vital that the students understand the history of the language, the beauty of the language and the culture, and that the fact that to study a language like that is like tasting some very unique, rare food. It's like, you know, the caviar of language learning. Everybody has more or less access to English, so you could say that, you know, it's like the McDonald's, but learning Sami, my God, you need to be really special to have an interest in this, and what a good choice this is. And if the teacher is convinced of this and can transmit that conviction and that enthusiasm to learners, then they will enjoy it. And I would say that the psychological and cognitive and cultural benefits are comparable for any language that anyone learns. So whether it's a widely spoken language or a language spoken by a smaller community, it doesn't matter. I mean, it just opens the horizons of learners, and that's what we need as teachers, I guess.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marc. I see that, Shlomo, it seemed like you enjoyed the last speech. Do you want to add something?
No, it's great. It's great to hear. First of all, it was great. I really love to see Lach Shoach. I stand humble before academicians who really do the hard legwork to prove the complexity of language learning. I think, Kevin, you have done a fabulous job in bringing these people with all that they have to offer to you. And I like to think that I can make a little bit of a humble contribution by the idea that I'm really trying to do this right now at this point in time. And I want everyone to really take away the message of belief based on experience. I'm not making this up. I have successful students year in and year out now who actually make significant accomplishments. And I believe that all of your teachers have, and your diligence and your sticking with it are really key elements in making it succeed. So really, my hat's off to you all that you're just, you know, we had a silent period, and I'm so happy that you're still out there on the playing field and trying to do your very best. And it was a pleasure to be part of it. It is a pleasure to be part of it.
Thank you very much, Shlomo. That was good final words for today. I will once again say thank you very much to the speakers here today. I think it was very interesting and useful, and I think it gives us motivation to continue with this work. Jeg vil også takke alle som deltok I dag. Minne om at det her blir lagt ut I ettertid, og om en uke klokka 13:00 så det på en ny runde med webinarer. Etter de 3 så vil vi komme med litt informasjon om hva som skjer videre, for det vil bli en oppfølging, ikke minst basert på utfordringen som Liv Karin kom med I begynnelsen av dagen. Så det vil bli et til webinar på et senere tidspunkt, sannsynligvis I mars. Da sier jeg takk for nå, og vel hjem, så ses vi alle om en uke. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.